When I first started on YouTube, one of the first videos I did was a series on building this workbench and installing the Veritas twin screw vise on it. And I really thought this vise was going to be my forever vise. I literally built the workbench around it. The screws of the vise go through the legs, so it's built around this vise. But here it is 4 years later, and I'm replacing it. There's a couple of things that bother me about it that really are a problem with operating it over the long term that weren't apparent to me right off the bat. I really liked it when I first put it on there. And I suggest that you watch the video where I install this and talk about getting it to work properly. If you watch the video, you saw me having to add in this sort of little half bushing underneath here to get it to operate smoothly. Now, this thing is a little finicky. The nut is mounted onto here, which is solid wood, and I made this out of plastic. And so this moves seasonally and this doesn't. And you wouldn't think that like an 1.5 inches or 2 inches of seasonal movement would amount to very much of anything. But apparently that's enough to make this not work very well. It doesn't do its job like half of the year. So I could redo this and make this part out of wood. Maybe that would help a little bit. But the other part of this is that it doesn't come with this. It does talk about doing this in the instructions, but it doesn't give you anything to do this. And without this, it doesn't work. So it's kind of annoying that they leave out part of what you need to make it work. But that's not the biggest issue that I have with this vise. Let me show you what's going to happen when I turn this screw. And before I do that, let me say that this is not normally the way that it works. Something has gone wrong that I'm going to have to fix. And I haven't fixed it because I knew I was going to have to do this video. Let me show you. Okay, so going in, they're both turning, right? Now let me reverse and watch this one. Nothing until I do a full turn. And now they're going to go. And I go back around a full turn before the other one starts going. So something has come loose here that I need to fix. And to show you, I'm going to take the cover off. Okay, so the two screws are connected by a chain, and there's a sprocket at each end. On this end, the sprocket is fixed onto the shaft, and there's a little release lever that you can use if you want to actually disengage the two of them and make the jaws out of parallel. In 4 years, I've used that once. On this end, the sprocket is attached with two set screws, and they have to make it adjustable because you need to get the jaw parallel to the bench, and the screw spacing is adjustable, so they can't work that out ahead of time or anything. So they got to make that adjustable somehow. And so they've used two set screws on this little guy, and it's those set screws that come loose. So I've tried putting Loctite on the set screws, and that did not work. Though on the cover, they've got this hole in here, and the idea is that you can put the Allen key through this hole to retighten the set screws. So I think they're aware of this problem, and this is their solution to it. But getting the Allen key through here and getting it engaged and getting the screw to actually line up with the hole while it's still parallel, that is way harder than just taking the cover off. So I don't think their solution is a very good one. I have the privilege of being a tester for a new vise that's coming to the market. It's called the Twin Turbo, developed by Andrew Klein. Now the main difference between this vise and the Veritas is that the two screws are connected by gears instead of a chain. And that allows it to have two speeds, one for fast travel and one for high torque. And let me say off the bat that this is not the stock installation of the vise. The normal way is the front plate is made out of a very heavy piece of steel. I replaced that with acrylic because Andy did a video where he was just showing off the mechanism, and he replaced the front plate with acrylic, and it looked cool, so I wanted that. And the change I made over what he did is I recessed it into the wood so that it's flush and gives a nice clean look and covers up the edges of the acrylic. So my installation process was not the normal way of doing it. So I'm not going to show you every detail of the installation. Andy already made a video of that. And, if you already have a video from the guy who designed the vise, you don't really need me to show you the same thing. But I did do some things that are different than from the way Andy did them. So I'll go into that. The installation of the twin turbo is a little bit more involved than the Veritas. But if you stick to the normal install, it really isn't too bad. When it comes to installing the gears into the vise, there's this middle assembly of gears, where there's 2 gears, a joiner, a bushing from either side, and this sleeve that goes in the middle. Now, Andy has you put that assembly together outside of the vise, and then sort of like drop it into place. And you have to do all that while keeping the alignment. I think it's easier to go through this process. You can put the bolt in that holds that middle gear assembly in from the back and just thread it in so it's sticking up about 1/8 of an inch or so. Then you can align the 2 outer gears. If you're following Andy's instructions, you've already gone through this alignment process. And the reason for that alignment process is because once you have all the gears assembled, the 2 screws are locked together and you can't adjust it for parallelism. So you have to do that ahead of time. So you get those 2 screws aligned where they should be, and then you can take those gears off, and then I just build that assembly of gears right in place rather than trying to drop it in. And then you put those outer gears back in, and with those bolts in place, you can test the operation of the gears before putting the front plate on. If you're using the steel front plate, once that front plate goes on, you can't see what's going on inside of there. Once that's all working, then you can take those bolts out and then put in the front plate and put the bolts in on the front. Now, I mentioned the alignment process. Well, I didn't do that. The way I did it was to completely assemble the vise, and then because my workbench top is a torsion box, it's not that heavy. So I was able to flip it over without too much difficulty. Then I could just lay the vise with the guide bushings and nuts in place and mark where they go. Now, in the end, this did work out okay for me. But if you do it this way, I suggest that you follow Andy's method of clamping a block in between the 2 nuts, just to keep them in line with each other and like square to the vise, because there's some play between the nut block and the screw. So if you don't have anything forcing that block to be square, then it could end up off at an angle. And one of mine was off at an angle, and it was off so far that I had to drill out the hole larger, which my drill press did not appreciate, drilling into that stuff. So this way does work. I can recommend doing that if you're able to flip your workbench over. So just be aware that this part of the process requires some precision. If you've got that hole drilled in the wrong spot, the nuts you could move like 3/4 of an inch over and try again. The guide blocks, they really should be on the end of the bench, so you've only got one shot at that. Now, to make that drilling as accurate as possible, I made a little drill bushing to go inside of those holes, because that hole is a really oddball size, and it's a deep hole. I just didn't have anything that could get inside of there and mark that center accurately. So that drill bushing forced the drill to be drilling square and in the center. So assuming the block is in the right place, the hole will be in the right place. I made my own acrylic front plate, and it's not too difficult to make one of these. You use the steel front plate as a template for all the holes. Normally the front plate overlaps the wood. You cut out the area of the vise with the bandsaw or jigsaw, and the front plate covers up that cut edge. So the stock front plate is a little bit larger than the back plate, but not a whole lot bigger. I wanted a little bit more of a reveal, So I increased the size of the front plate by about 1/4 of an inch. I made the outer piece of wood for the vise thicker by the thickness of the acrylic, which is 3/16, which is the same as the steel. Once I had the front plate cut out, I temporarily installed that, and I used some of the cutoffs as a spacer under the bushings so that it wouldn't be bending the acrylic. I could bolt it down tight in place and then trace around it with a knife. Then I just removed the bulk of the waste with the router and then cleaned it up with a chisel. I'm a little upset with myself because the reveal is not consistent all the way around. There's one area where it tapers and one side is wider. But it's alright, when you look there, you're mesmerized by the gears and you don't really look at the reveal too closely. I did run into a couple of problems along the way. Now keep in mind that this is pre-production hardware, and so part of the reason for doing this is to work out the kinks. So when I get everything all together, whenever I would try to clamp something in the vise, if I clamp something on this side, this washer on this side would fall out. And if I clamp something on this side, the washer on this side would fall out. Now I'm told that there were some issues with tolerances in this first batch of parts. So this is something that's going to get addressed, whether it's the manufacturing tolerance is getting better or a design change to keep it from happening. My solution was really simple. I just glued them in there and with CA glue. Seems to have solved the problem. Andy's method of grinding down all the posts and making my recess deeper was a little more complicated. I went with the glue. When it came to drilling for the dog holes in the vise, my bench has a center row of dog holes, and so there should be a center dog hole in the vise. But I went to drill that, I realized that there was a conflict between that hole and the center top mounting bolt for the vise. Pretty obvious that it's a problem, but it just didn't occur to me until I saw that sawdust coming out of the hole. So if I had known that this was a problem beforehand, I could have dealt with it. I could have just made this inner piece of wood thicker and cut that bolt to be shorter and used a nut on it instead of tapping threads into the wood. And that would have solved the problem. A really subtle feature of the vise is this sleeve here. So when I turn the screws, you'll see this sleeve does not rotate. So for the first 2 inches of the opening of the vise, you can set a block of wood down in here and it doesn't touch the screw that has oil on it. Also, Andy included this cork jaw lining material, which is really grippy. I never put any lining material on my Veritas vise. I just, never got around to doing the research of what I was supposed to be getting and finding a place to get it. So I'm not entirely sure whether this is going to be included in like the normal purchase price of the vise, but I know he's planning on selling it. So I'm not sure if it's included or if it's going to be like an add-on thing that you can get. But it's nice that he's, really thought out not just the mechanism of the vise, but really the whole ensemble of what you need to get the vise fully operational and working great. If you're wondering about these holes down here, those are connected to the dog holes. On my old vise, I was using these Veritas prairie dogs that just sit in a blind hole. And my thinking was that as long as these were in the hole would not fill up with sawdust. But some sawdust does get in there, and it kind of gets into this mechanism on the bottom and keeps it from popping up properly. So I've thought of a way to try to prevent that, which is to make the hole be able to drain out, and I'm going to put a screw in, and the prairie dog will sit on top of the head of that screw. Part of being a tester is to be able to make suggestions to Andy on things that could be improved. And there's one thing about the Veritas vise that I really like, and that is this knob on the handle, which allows this to function as a normal handle, but it can also act sort of more like a hand wheel. Now, I don't really love the way that this has been implemented. This thumb screw that locks it in the middle is, kind of tedious to remove. Unscrewing, I'm unscrewing, and there it goes. And then it's kind of hard to get it to re-engage back into the hole that you drill into the handle. But I hardly ever take it out of that middle position. So I really wanted to try this vise with that knob. And so I didn't want to, make any permanent changes because I didn't know how it was going to work. So I came up with this, which slips on here. And it just stays on there by friction. And this is so good. Now, of course, I've had a vise with this knob for 4 years, so this is what I'm used to, but I love this. So if there's one thing that I would really like to see, it's a permanent version of this implemented into here. Something with a push button in the middle, or it would be locked in here and keep it in the middle and keep it from rotating so you can crank on it. But, you just push the button and it releases. I would love to see that. I would even prefer to have that and only have one speed versus having 2 speeds and not having this. So, it's just one person's opinion, but, I can certainly live with this, though. Because it's, you're losing half the torque by having this in the middle, but you've got the 2 speeds. So it's like you've got this huge torque bonus in the low speed. Now, obviously, this isn't a scientific comparison. I'm not applying the same exact amount of force each time. What you really can't see is how hard I'm working and how smooth the vise operates. And what I can tell you is, even in the high speed mode, the twin turbo takes less force to move than the Veritas. In low speed mode, it's so easy to move that I can literally just move it with my pinky. And it just takes no effort to move it at all. And this is not an Izzy Swan pinky. This is a 12-year-old girl pinky. I will let you draw your own conclusions about which vise is better. Obviously, I'm a little biased since I received this vise for free, and I would consider Andy a friend. And also, I've only had this vise for a short period of time, and it took quite a while for the flaws that I complained about at the beginning of the video with the Veritas to really surface. So, a year from now, I might have some complaints about this vise. I don't have any right now. But also consider this. I had a vise on here that was working. And I took it off and did a lot of work to put a different vise in its place. If there wasn't a substantial improvement to make that effort worth it, I would be pissed. Regardless of whether Andy's a friend or not. If it sucked, I'd be pissed right now. And I'm not pissed. I'm happy.